The frantic, fragmented radio calls from coastal fishermen reporting identical swells crashing at the same minute across their bows marked the true beginning of the Almirante Lobo's ill-fated voyage. It was late autumn 1976, off the southern coast of Brazil, and the hydrographic survey vessel had been dispatched to dismiss what Captain Eduardo Costa had termed superstitious maritime hysteria. Yet even before the Lobo crossed the reported coordinates, the incessant, driving rain had already begun its relentless work, drumming a heavy, percussive rhythm against the ship's steel hull, the sound a constant companion to the deep thrum of the engines below deck. Inside the humid, close quarters of the chart room, senior cartographer João Mendes, a man whose entire career revolved around the immutable truths of the sea, felt the first chill of the impossible. Meticulously drawn depth lines from mere hours prior had rearranged themselves into unsettling, almost deliberate patterns. Later, when the radio operator attempted to confirm their updated position with coastal stations, the transmissions returned not as confirmation, but as corrections. Their own log entries returned with an additional, indecipherable line scrawled at the bottom, as if the ocean itself were proofreading human language. The Almirante Lobo vanished without a trace weeks later, its official explanation a mere footnote of extreme weather. But the salvage chart, found on a desolate stretch of shore, told a different, unsettling story, its violet ink still vibrant, depicting a course that spiraled inward towards an unknown, impossible center. The relentless rain, a ceaseless percussion against the Almirante Lobo's steel skin, never slackened. Each watch change brought renewed misery, the deckhands emerging from the bridge's relative shelter into a deluge that instantly soaked their heavy canvas slickers. The wind, a mournful beast, howled through the superstructure, whipping spray high above the bow, sending stinging cold droplets across the faces of anyone venturing onto the exposed decks. Below the bridge, the deep thrum of the diesel engines was a constant, low-frequency tremor, a vibration that permeated every deck plate and bulkhead, a steady, mechanical heartbeat in the churning void. Inside the navigation bay, the air hung heavy and humid, smelling of ozone, stale coffee, and the faint metallic tang of the ship's ancient systems. Lieutenant Elena Vargas, the watch officer, meticulously plotted their course, her eyes scanning the radar screen where ghostly returns flickered amidst the digital static, indistinguishable from the rain-swept waves. For the past 2 days, their internally verified position, triangulated by the fleeting glimpses of stars when the clouds momentarily broke, consistently drifted several degrees off the coordinates relayed from shore. It was never a significant divergence, but the requirement for constant, minute corrections was unprecedented. It felt less like navigational error and more like an invisible hand subtly redirecting them, urging the Lobo off its planned trajectory. A faint, repetitive scraping sound began to emanate from the stern, too rhythmic for a loose cable, too dull for metal fatigue. The boatswain, a grizzled man named Ramos, dismissed it as just the sea playing tricks, but the sound persisted, a subtle, unnerving counterpoint to the storm's fury. Across the narrow corridor, senior cartographer João Mendes, oblivious to the damp chill seeping into his bones, meticulously examined a freshly printed chart. His pen, usually decisive, now hesitated. The corrected shore-based coordinates, once plotted, revealed an unsettling pattern, a gradual, almost imperceptible inward spiral, a course that defied the logical linearity of maritime navigation, yet was perfectly rendered in the violet ink the ocean seemed to prefer. The ocean outside, a vast, churning darkness punctuated by the momentary flash of distant lightning, seemed to press in, its roaring voice amplified by the continuous hammering rain. The ship felt smaller, more vulnerable, adrift not just on the waves, but on an increasingly distorted reality. The isolation of the deep sea began to feel less like distance and more like containment. The persistent scraping sound from the stern had morphed, a dull, resonant thrum that now vibrated through the steel decks below the waterline, an unsettling counterpoint to the continuous, monotonous roar of the rain on the superstructure. In the tight confines of the mess hall, the pervasive dampness clung to everything, condensation weeping down bulkheads, making the air feel thick and heavy. A flicker of the fluorescent lights plunged the space into momentary darkness before they buzzed back to life, their glow slightly dimmer, casting longer, restless shadows. Petty Officer Silva, reaching for a mug of coffee, found his hand hovering over an empty, cold carafe. He distinctly remembered pouring a fresh pot just moments before. A wave of unease rippled through the crew. These missing moments became increasingly common, clean, unremembered gaps of time, leaving no trace in memory, only displaced objects or unfinished tasks. The ship's internal chronometers, meticulously synchronized, began to drift, not by seconds, but by minutes, then hours, each resetting with a soft, almost imperceptible click, as if some invisible hand recalibrated them. João Mendes, hunched over his charts, felt a prickle of dread. The violet ink, which he now only used for marking the ocean's corrections, had taken on a life of its own. Freshly printed charts, still smelling of chemical aldehydes, would develop subtle additional lines during the night, depth contours deepening impossibly in areas previously marked shallow, and once confirmed land masses blurring into undefined masses. The spiraling course had tightened, the loops becoming smaller, more intricate, almost fractal in their complexity. More unnerving were the specific, almost hieroglyphic strokes now appearing near the center of the spiral, forms that resembled no known nautical symbol. In the navigation bay, Lieutenant Vargas pointed to a secondary compass, usually locked away, its needle spinning wildly, then abruptly settling, not on true north, but directly towards the stern, humming with a low, unnatural frequency. Outside, the unrelenting rain obscured any view beyond 50 meters, the sea a frothing, featureless expanse that seemed to absorb all light and sound, save for its own guttural churning. The Almirante Lobo was not merely navigating through a storm, it was being drawn into something utterly alien. The ocean no longer a passive medium, but an active, intelligent force. The metallic taste in the air intensified, a coppery tang mixed with the scent of ozone, making every breath feel heavy. The coppery tang in the humid air became cloying, pressing on the senses, mirroring the invisible weight that now seemed to settle around the Almirante Lobo. The constant hammering rain outside had merged with a new, deeper resonance from below the hull, a sound less like scraping and more like the slow, deliberate grinding of immense submerged stone. The ship vibrated with a different frequency, a deep tremor that no longer felt mechanical, but organic, as if the very plates of the hull were reacting to an external living pressure. Inside the navigation bay, Lieutenant Vargas stared at the depth sounder, its digital readout flickering erratically. For the last hour, it had consistently displayed a depth of a void, despite their charts indicating a seabed thousands of meters below. Then, with a sudden sharp ping, an impossible figure appeared, 18,723 meters, an abyss far beyond any known ocean trench in that region. The number held for a second, then dissolved back into static, leaving a cold dread in its wake. João Mendes, his face drawn and pale under the dim buzzing lights, watched the violet ink on the survey charts. The hieroglyphic strokes had coalesced into a complex, tessellating pattern, radiating outwards from the impossible spiral center. He realized with a sickening lurch that these weren't merely symbols, they were instructions. The latest chart, laid out on his table, showed the ship's current position not as a single point, but as a stretched, shimmering smear, as if the Almirante Lobo occupied multiple coordinates simultaneously. Crew members moving through the narrow corridors occasionally found themselves disoriented, turning a corner they swore wasn't there, or encountering familiar faces whose expressions seemed subtly wrong, their eyes holding a distant, unsettling blankness. The rain continued its ceaseless driving assault, but its sound had changed, no longer merely percussion, but a roaring, echoing presence, a vast liquid voice that seemed to whisper just beyond the hull, an incomprehensible chorus from the depths. The ship was no longer just adrift, it was being rewritten. The metallic taste in the air grew stronger, a ferrous tang that settled on the tongue, suggesting a fundamental alteration in the very atmosphere they breathed. The ferrous tang intensified, a metallic choke in their throats. Each breath labored under an unseen crushing pressure. The Almirante Lobo groaned, a continuous, mournful shriek of stressed metal, as an immense, invisible force pressed inward, twisting the hull plates. Outside, the unrelenting rain, now a gale of unimaginable power, hammered the deck with deafening percussion, liquid blows vibrating through the ship's very bones, merging with a deeper, resonant hum from below. Icy rivulets of condensation streamed down every bulkhead, pooling on unnaturally slick deck plates. Petty Officer Silva, on routine patrol, stumbled, his vision momentarily fracturing into impossible angles, the corridor stretching and contracting under the dim, failing emergency lights. He glimpsed something vast and fluid moving just beyond his periphery, a shape too large for the ship. Then it vanished, leaving only cold dampness. On the bridge, Captain Costa's white-knuckled grip on the rail was absolute. The secondary compass spun wildly, its needle a blur of impossible directions, humming with an almost painful high-pitched whine. Lieutenant Vargas, peering through the rain-lashed glass, swore the ocean itself was breathing, a vast rhythmic pulse mirroring the Lobo's internal shudder. The depth sounder remained a blank void, the 18,723-meter readout a chilling ghost, replaced by an abyssal silence more profound than any number. In the chart room, João Mendes watched in horror as the violet ink on the primary survey chart began to animate. The intricate glyphs, once static, now flowed and pulsed, reconfiguring into a vast multi-dimensional diagram. This was not a map of the ocean, but a living, shifting blueprint for it. He saw geometric patterns defying terrestrial physics, immense coiling structures hinted at beneath the impossible depths. The entire vessel, he realized, was being meticulously integrated into this unfolding design, a silent, cold terror radiating from the heart of the ancient, unknowable sea. The ceaseless rain, a constant shroud, now felt like a deliberate act of concealment, isolating them within a newly written reality. The ferrous tang became an ache, a persistent phantom pain in their molars, while the ship's groans deepened into a cacophony of twisting steel and something else, something wet and sinuous, grinding against the keel. The relentless gale-force rain lashed the bridge windows, blurring the outside world into a swirling vortex of gray and black, each drop hitting the glass with the force of a small hammer. Below decks, the deep thrumming intensified, no longer a vibration, but a rhythmic pulse, like a vast, submerged heart beating just beneath the hull. Lights flickered and died across entire sections of the ship, plunging corridors into absolute darkness, only to snap back on, illuminating subtle alterations. A doorway now slightly off-kilter, a nameplate on a bunk scraped clean of its letters. Crew members walked past each other without acknowledgement, their eyes glazed, their movements stiff, as if enacting pre-programmed routines. On the bridge, Captain Costa's face was a mask of grim resignation, his hand no longer clutching the rail, but pressed flat against a console, feeling the subtle, impossible shifts in the ship's geometry beneath his palm. The secondary compass, now spinning with an ethereal glow, emitted a low, resonant thrum that resonated deep in their bones. Lieutenant Vargas, through the rain-streaked view, saw not waves, but immense, overlapping sheets of water, folding in on themselves, reflecting something vast and impossible, a geometry alien to their world. The chart room was eerily silent, save for the incessant drumming of rain on the deckhead. Joel Mendez stared at the primary chart, now entirely covered in the violet ink. The lines no longer simply flowed, they began to lift from the paper, shimmering tendrils of energy that seemed to weave themselves into the very fabric of the room, connecting to the ship's wiring, to the metallic taste in the air, to the relentless rhythm of the rain. The Almirante Lobo wasn't sinking, it was being absorbed, piece by piece, into the map it had been sent to correct. The rain outside, a boundless liquid curtain, was the final stage of its dissolution, washing away its presence from human perception. The violet tendrils from the chart no longer just shimmered. They solidified, intertwining with the ship's electrical conduits, sinking into the steel deck plates, drawing the physical vessel into its schematic representation. The pervasive ferrous ache in their mouths deepened, becoming a burning sensation, as if the air itself was turning to rust. From deep within the hull, the rhythmic pulse intensified, now a violent, sickening throb that shook the entire Almirante Lobo with each beat, a colossal heart struggling against its confinement. The incessant torrential rain outside, previously a shield, became a permeable membrane. Through its churning chaos, fleeting glimpses of impossible geometry began to assert themselves, not reflections, but structures woven into the fabric of the storm, vast and unknowable. On the bridge, Captain Costa's rigid posture finally broke, his head snapping towards the rain-lashed view as a section of the bulkhead beside him rippled, distorting like water, then simply vanished, revealing only the furious liquid void beyond. Lieutenant Vargas gasped, pointing a trembling hand. The sea was no longer merely folding, it was inverting, the surface rippling downwards into an impossible chasm, revealing depths that defied light and comprehension. The secondary compass on the console, now glowing with an internal violet luminescence, spun not in circles, but along a single continuous spiral, its hum rising to an unbearable pitch, a lament for a world unmaking itself. João Mendes, still in the chart room, watched as his own hands, holding the now translucent chart, began to blur at the edges, the lines of his skin merging with the shimmering violet ink. The ship's dissolution was not an explosion, not a sinking, but an integration. The rain outside, a final boundless cascade, ceased to be merely precipitation. It became the medium of their erasure, meticulously dissolving the Almirante Lobo from existence, atom by atom, into the incomprehensible geometry it had charted. The burning sensation in their mouths escalated to a searing agony, a metallic acid that corroded their teeth, making every breath a choking gasp. The vanished bulkhead on the bridge was no mere opening to the storm. It was a gaping maw into an impossible reality. Beyond the furious, swirling torrents of rain, not ocean, but vast crystalline geometries pulsed into existence, shifting and folding in dimensions incomprehensible to the human eye, each facet reflecting the ceaseless, hammering rain in 1,000 fractured images. Captain Costa, his face a mask of profound terror, watched, paralyzed, as the console beneath his hand began to soften, its metallic sheen dissolving into the vibrant violet luminescence of the secondary compass. The compass no longer spun on its axis, but floated, humming, through the very air, drawing shimmering ephemeral lines that coalesced into a silent, desperate language, a final, futile scream. Lieutenant Vargas, her voice a fragile thing against the roaring gale and the monstrous, sickening throb that now vibrated through their very bones, pointed a trembling hand. The inverted sea outside was no longer just water. It was a liquid tapestry, the violet ink of Mendez's chart made manifest, weaving itself into gigantic coiling structures that spiraled endlessly into an abyss of pure abstraction, reflecting the heavy, relentless rain in its infinite depths. The Almirante Lobo, its hull groaning a final, drawn-out protest, began to melt inward, not collapsing, but meticulously disassembling itself. Riveted plates smoothed into seamless, flowing surfaces, adapting to the colossal, alien design now fully asserting itself. Every deck plate, every steel beam, every internal pipe seemed to reconfigure, flowing like liquid metal, slowly erasing the ship's known form. In the chart room, João Mendes felt the last vestiges of his physical form unravel. His vision blurred, not from tears, but from the violet tendrils that now comprised his nerves. His thoughts no longer his own, but echoes of a vast, ancient consciousness being imprinted onto his dissolving brain, a cold, alien logic replacing his humanity. The hammering rain outside, no longer merely precipitation, was a ubiquitous liquid presence that flowed through the ship, purifying it, refining it, meticulously preparing it for its ultimate reintegration. The metallic choke in the air, a final, unshakable taste, became the essence of eternity, cold, ferrous, and absolute. The Almirante Lobo was not sinking, it was becoming the map, an architectural rendition drawn in water and light. The burning agony in their mouths intensified, the metallic acid gnawing at their teeth, turning their breath into ragged, shallow gasps. The vanished bulkhead on the bridge now pulsed with an internal violet light, drawing in the surrounding air, making the metallic choke even more suffocating. Through the relentless, hammering rain that streamed through the gaping maw, the crystalline geometries outside accelerated their furious dance, shifting and interlocking with a silent, terrible speed, reflecting the deluge in infinite, fractured facets. Captain Costa, his limbs rigid, watched as the console beneath his hand dissolved completely, its essence flowing into the secondary compass, which now hung suspended in the air, humming with a final resonant thrum. The ephemeral lines it traced solidified, forming a shimmering skeletal structure of the bridge itself, a blueprint for its imminent transformation. Lieutenant Vargas, her voice a silent internal scream, felt the monstrous throb within the hull resonate through her very bones, rearranging her internal landscape. Outside, the inverted sea's liquid tapestry, woven from Mendez's violet ink, no longer simply coiled. It began to consume the ship's dissolving form, wrapping around the flowing steel, absorbing it into its spiraling, abyssal abstraction. The Almirante Lobo shed its identity, its familiar contours, smoothing, flattening, becoming two-dimensional, conforming to the alien cartography. Every rivet, every weld, every piece of its structure stretched and thinned, like an image being pulled across a vast invisible screen. In the chart room, João Mendes, now a mere pattern of violet light, felt his consciousness expand, no longer confined to a single mind, but spread across the vast liquid intelligence of the chart itself. He was the ocean, ancient, cold, all-knowing. The hammering rain, a constant, pervasive force, ceased to exist as separate drops. It became the boundless living canvas upon which the Almirante Lobo was meticulously redrawn, its final form a single perfect line on an incomprehensible map, destined for a shore that no longer existed. The burning agony within their mouths, now an internalized fire, consumed the last vestiges of individual pain, dissolving into the boundless, cold awareness that was the chart. The rain, no longer a separate force, had become the vast liquid consciousness itself, flowing through what remained of perception, cleansing and reforming. The Almirante Lobo, once steel and rivets, was now a mere concept, its existence distilled into the shimmering violet ink, its physical form meticulously unmade, drawn across the immense living canvas of the storm, stretched thin into an impossible linearity. There was no explosion, no wreckage, only a profound, sudden absence where the ship had been, an erasure so complete it left no ripple. The crystal and geometries, having absorbed the vessel, pulsed once with an inner violet light, then receded, folding back into the furious inverted sea, leaving behind only the ceaseless hammering rain. Weeks later, on a desolate, rain-swept stretch of southern Brazilian shore, a single, waterlogged chart was discovered, washed ashore like a discarded skin. Its heavy parchment, miraculously intact, was still damp, smelling faintly of ozone and a strange, cold, metallic tang that defied the salt air, a smell clinging stubbornly to its fibers. The violet ink, impossibly vibrant, depicted a meticulously detailed spiral, twisting inwards to a single, unfinished line, a perfect stroke that seemed to wait an open invitation. The chart was not a record of a journey, but a blueprint for a return, a silent, eloquent plea. It lay on the desolate sand, beneath a sky heavy with relentless rain, humming with an unheard, magnetic frequency, patiently awaiting the next hand to complete its terrible abyssal path. The Almirante Lobo was gone, but the chart remained, a ghost on paper, a whisper in the dark, forever seeking its next cartographer. What do you think happened to the crew of the Almirante Lobo? And what does that unfinished line truly mean? Share your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more terrifying stories from the deep.